Welcome to the American Story. Stories about all the things that make America the country we know and love. The place of slavery in the American founding is one of the great and enduring questions of American history. My old friend Thomas West, professor of politics at Hillsdale College, has a chapter on the theme in his excellent book, Vindicating the Founders. It is the best brief reflection I know of on the subject, and well worth reading. This is one of 3 stories that is greatly indebted to it. Any errors that slip in are, of course, exclusively my own. This is Chris Flannery with the Claremont Institute. I call this one AntiSlavery Constitution. August 21st was a rough day at the Constitutional Convention, meeting in Independence Hall in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787. Official deliberations had begun on May 25th, but only now, 3 months later, were the framers officially taking up a provision that had made its way into their draft Constitution, which came to be called the Non-Importation Clause. It would forbid the Congress they were designing to tax or prohibit the importation of slaves anywhere in the United States, forever. Among the many challenges to the statesmanship of these framers of the Constitution, none was more fundamental or intractable than the problem of slavery. The Confederation that had just achieved its independence was, as Abraham Lincoln would later say, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. But it had no authority to interfere with slavery in any state where it existed. Delegates of major slave states at the convention insisted they would never be part of a union that interfered with their institution of slavery. The provision before them now was written in deference to that insistence. Heated discussion erupted immediately. The first delegate to comment was Luther Martin of Delaware, who argued that allowing importation of slaves was inconsistent with the principles of the Revolution and dishonorable to the American character. John Rutledge of South Carolina, a strong advocate of Southern interests, promptly responded that religion and humanity had nothing to do with this question. Interest alone is the governing principle with nations. The true question is whether the Southern states shall or shall not be parties to the Union. Oliver Ellsworth of Connecticut tried to find common ground in the position of the old Confederation, that the morality or wisdom of slavery are considerations belonging to the states themselves and not to the national government they were trying to create. Charles Pinckney of South Carolina said, "South Carolina can never receive the Constitution if it prohibits the slave trade." So there they were. Everyone at the convention understood that slavery was inconsistent with the principles of the Revolution. No one defended the justice of slavery. Even Southern slaveholders denounced it as a great evil. But representatives of the slave states insisted that it was an evil they could not now do without, and that they would not be part of the Union if the slave trade were prohibited. Finally, a committee was formed to find language that could be agreed on. On August 24th, the committee presented their results to the convention, and what the convention saw was that the very pro-slavery non-importation clause had been moved in a very anti-slavery direction. Whereas the original clause would have forbidden Congress to tax or prohibit importation of slaves into any state forever, the revised clause would allow Congress to begin taxing importation of slaves immediately, and to prohibit importation of slaves into any new state immediately. Congress could begin to prohibit importing slaves in the existing states as early as 1800. So instead of a protection of the slave trade in the whole United States forever, it would be protected in the few existing slave states for 12 years. General Pinckney of South Carolina made one more push for the slave interest, proposing 1808 rather than 1800 as the year at which Congress would be allowed to prohibit the slave trade in existing states, and to this the convention reluctantly agreed, though James Madison bitterly observed, 20 years will produce all the mischief that can be apprehended from the liberty to import slaves. Congress, true to anti-slavery spirit, prohibited the importation of slaves at the earliest opportunity, on January 1st, 1808. But as the Constitution made its way into the 19th century, radical abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison condemned it as a covenant with death. because of the compromises with slavery. They urged the northern free states to secede from the southern slave states so that the free states could purge themselves of the evil of slavery. Their motto was, "No union with slaveholders." The great anti-slavery activist Frederick Douglass at first agreed with that motto. But as he grew in wisdom, he found himself more in agreement with the framers. As he put it, "My argument against the dissolution of the American Union is this. It would place the slave system more exclusively under the control of the slaveholding states and withdraw it from the power in the northern states, which is opposed to slavery." Fidelity to the principles of the Constitution was the true foundation of the anti-slavery cause. Rooted in the anti-slavery principles of the Declaration, the Constitution was, in Douglass's memorable words, a glorious liberty document. Thanks for being part of the American Story. This is Chris Flannery with the Claremont Institute. If you'd like to learn more about these stories or how you might support them, please visit our website at www.theamericanstorypodcast.org. That's theamericanstorypodcast.org.